This episode is brought to you by the Boneyard Huskies Club. The Boneyard Huskies Club empowers UConn student athletes while providing UConn fans with access to exclusive community, utility, and rewards. The Boneyard Huskies Club is excited to announce Locker Mania. If the UConn men's basketball team wins the NCAA championship, fans who purchase a Boneyard Huskies Club men's basketball 2022-2023 season collectible will automatically receive full credit back for each purchase, and the athletes will still receive the full revenue from sales of their collectibles. For more information, go to boneyardhuskiesclub.com. That's Huskies with a YZ at the end. boneyardhuskiesclub.com.
Okay, we've got the much anticipated rematch Wednesday night of UConn Providence. So joining me today to get ready for that game is Bill Koch of the Providence Journal. So Bill, welcome back to the podcast.
Jared, great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So at this point in the season, getting close to the home stretch here, what have been your overall thoughts on this Providence team so far this season?
Really strong culturally. More home runs in the transfer portal, whether it's Bryce Hopkins or Devin Carter. Really just an extension of what they were able to do last year, playing at or near the top of the Big East. And I think that says a lot about Ed Cooley and where he has his program right now, and just what a high level they're operating on at this point.
The play of late, I know got off to that 9-2 start quickly in Big East. Been 3-2 since then. I know they had the big win over Villanova yesterday. How would you say they've been playing of late in particular?
Playing well. Tough schedule, obviously. You're losing some road games there, and that's not uncommon with every other team in the league. I know the top four haven't dropped a home game yet to this point. You're talking about Providence, Creighton, Marquette, Xavier. It's been very difficult to win on the road against those teams. You look at Providence losing at Xavier in overtime. Obviously a slip against St. John's and one that ultimately could cost them a chance to repeat as regular season champions. You just can't have a mistake like that when you have so many other teams playing so well.
Yeah, and I think UConn fans can commiserate with the loss to St. John's there. So they had to deal with the same thing. As you look back on the first matchup between these two teams, what stood out to you in that game back in Providence in early January was?
Well, certainly Providence's ability to get to the foul line. You're plus 19 from there. You're 29 for 35. Their ability to defend the three-point line, UConn's just 5 for 22 in that game. Other thing I would say, and this goes back to UConn's last game against Seton Hall, is Dan Hurley has tightened his rotation a little bit. Didn't see Joey Calcaterra against the Pirates. You see 8 players primarily with double-digit minutes. I think he is more zeroed in on who he'd like to play going forward. And I think Providence arrived at that point a little earlier in the season, and maybe that allowed them, to perform at a little higher level here as we, get into the third week of February.
As you look to this rematch, who are kind of those matchups that you're most looking forward to seeing out on the court on Wednesday night?
I think if you go back to the first game, guy who flashed at the time and who was really coming into his own was Donovan Clingan, who has been a revelation this season. Certainly one of the best freshmen in the league. And so I wonder what UConn will do with respect to Sonogo and Clingan against Ed Croswell. If they'll try to wear him out, if they'll play both of them at the same time, if maybe they'll show a little bit of zone, because Providence is a little thin up front. They've lessened the minutes for Clifton Moore. I don't think they really see a major role for him. It's mostly Ed Croswell and Bryce Hopkins up front, and UConn has bigger alternatives. So I wonder if we see a little zone or we see the two big guys together out there at some point.
And I think they did throw those two big guys out there together for a little bit in that first game at Providence. So interesting to see if maybe that gets brought up a little bit in this game. A guy who missed most of that game in the first matchup against UConn was Jared Bynum. He's been with Providence for a bit. What does he bring to this team, and what do you think he adds to this matchup that you didn't get to see that first go around?
He's the steadiest pair of hands I have in the backcourt, the most experienced, guy who can make an open shot. who is probably their best dual threat guard, with respect to someone who can handle the ball. Somebody like Devin Carter is a better defender and can score at a higher clip, but he's not necessarily the ball handler that Bynum is. Allen Breed is really a defense first point guard. He's not really the type of guy who's a threat to score at all. And Jaden Pierre is very young. He's a freshman and has gotten some minutes at times, but I don't necessarily think they trust him to play 15, 20 minutes at a time. So Bynum in that way fills a gap, fills a position that every good team needs, really. Steady hands, point guard, can run the offense, relatively low turnover guy, and someone who's in his fifth year.
I know it would have been the story of the game last game if UConn ended up losing by 3, and that was Corey Floyd hitting a 3 against UConn in that game. What has his role been on this team this season? It seems like his minutes have kind of been hit or miss depending on the game, but from your perspective and watching this team more often, what kind of roles he played?
A defensive one, mostly. I think they like his size as a guard. I think they like his physicality as a guard. He made a really good play, actually, toward the end of the Creighton game in regulation. That ended up being an overtime game, double overtime game. But there was a possession at the end of regulation. Creighton had the ball. Floyd was in to play defense. Providence trapped the ball out by the midcourt stripe, and Floyd was back toward the lane. And managed to pay enough attention to the fact that Baylor Shireman threw a lob pass to Arthur Kaluma, trying to go backdoor, and Floyd was smart enough to read it, take a couple steps back toward the rim, and contest the pass. And he made it a very difficult layup attempt for Kaluma, who missed it. Ultimately, the game went to overtime and then double overtime. But it was a pretty advanced play by a guy who really hasn't gotten a lot of time. Showed that he was paying attention. And certainly that's why he's out there to try and guard somebody. And I think that's, mainly the role that he's had on this team so far.
I'm going to take a quick break from the interview to tell you about my friends at Martin Rosol's Meats. This fourth-generation Connecticut family business produces kielbasa, hot dogs, sausages, and deli meats using Martin Rosol's very own original recipes. Their products can be found in grocery stores, delis, restaurants, and hot dog stands throughout the state. And if you're looking for your fill right away, check out their retail store in New Britain. For more information, visit martinroselsinc.com and go support a UConn fan-owned business. And now, back to the interview.
You've seen all these Big East teams, up close. Who's impressed you the most as we kind of head down towards these final few games and get ready for MSG in a few weeks?
I mean, certainly the most explosive team, I think, is Marquette. And, we have a stake in that, obviously, with Tyler Koch. He's a Cumberland native.
Yeah.
Was a rookie of the year in the A-10 at George Mason. And, now in his second year at Marquette, he's playing at an all Big East level. They're one of the most efficient offenses in the country. So on an off night, if you're looking for a game to watch, I think they're pretty entertaining. I also look at Xavier and the fact that they had the bones of an NCAA tournament team last year, but struggled horribly down the stretch. You add a dynamic player like Sule Boom to that mix, who's played like an all Big East type guy. I really enjoy watching them as well. So, probably those two teams, and obviously Creighton, is preseason top 5, who's got Ryan Kalkbrenner healthy now, who really seems to have rounded into form. Thin rotation. They only played primary 5 starters and maybe some nominal minutes off the bench. But aside from Providence, those 3 teams who they're competing with are all really good watches, I think, from a neutral perspective.
Last year was the first year with fans back a little bit at these games, and we only got one UConn Providence game. Now we're going to get 2 this season, potentially a third the way things might line up at MSG. I'll wrap with this one. How do you feel like this rivalry is going? Because I feel like it's starting to pick itself up a bit more, especially this year. I feel like you're starting to see it a little bit more.
Yeah, with URI down and not in the conference, I think Providence looks more towards UConn as a regional rival. Obviously without BC in the league as well, without Syracuse in the league as well. I think these two teams are a short drive from one another. I think they both have a place that the other would like to occupy. Obviously Providence is contending the last couple of years. They've been in the Big East and a factor. since it reformed, UConn is in the American, and sort of playing against Tulsa and East Carolina, and the fan base wasn't really thrilled about those matchups. And obviously Providence fans are envious of UConn's overall success, winning 4 national titles and winning the Big East and Big East championships prior to them moving to the AAC. So I think it's natural that both schools would like to pit themselves against one another, and I think it makes for good fun. And obviously you're seeing it a little bit in recruiting now as well. They're starting to go after the same players from the prep ranks in New England, same type of players from New York and New Jersey and Philadelphia. And, I just think when you have relationships like that with other fan bases, that's what makes conference play so much fun.
I lied. I've got one more, and I think this is a good way to wrap this one too. With you having been so close to this team in following Providence, seeing that first matchup, what's the biggest key if UConn's going to win this game? How do you think they best exploit weakness in Providence's game to get their revenge back and take this one?
Well, being home obviously is a big part of it, and playing at Gamble, I think more importantly, I don't think they see the XL Center is the same sort of advantage that Gamble is. Defend without fouling if they can. I know that's something that they've struggled with throughout the year. But it's something that UConn is a good defensive team. If they're able to keep Providence off the line, it stands to reason they'll be pretty difficult to score against. And obviously you hope that, maybe with that tighter rotation, you find a little bit more offensive cohesion. UConn was not very good offensively in the first game, only had 61 points.
Yeah.
And really had a difficult time at that end of the floor. So I think UConn is looking to build momentum here toward the Big East tournament, regardless of where they ended up seeded. If they're in that 4-5 game, which it looks like they could be, that's a good opportunity to play a 4 seed and then ultimately play a 1 seed and start working on your NCAA seeding again. Maybe you can get up to the 4 line. If you have a good finish here, you've got some opportunities to do it. So I would imagine Dan Hurley's telling his team, look, our run to March into the postseason, it starts right now against an NCAA tournament type team in Providence. And we have a chance over the next couple of weeks to try to round into form as we go to Madison Square Garden and then into the NCAA tournament.
And again, another one just came to mind. So,
Sure.
Grab me for one more here. You've been around, this Rhode Island sports scene for a while. You've seen Dan Hurley at URI. Some of the criticism from some of the fans, and I think you take it with some grain of salt, is that they've struggled the past 2 years in the NCAA tournament. They've had some trouble winning some of these close big games. What can you say to the fans from what you've seen of Dan Hurley and being able to get over that hump and win those big games from what he's been able to do at Rhode Island?
Yeah, he's in his 5th year at Connecticut, and that was the year that he won the A10 tournament at Rhode Island. Year that he beat Creighton in the first round of the NCAA tournament and had a second half lead on Oregon, an Oregon team that ended up going to the Final Four that had 5 NBA players on it.
Yeah.
So I think he's at the point right now where you look at his team now, the way they started the year, some of the non-conference wins they had, the recruiting class that he has coming in. I think he's pushing on the ceiling right now and will ultimately break through at some point here. If it's not this March, it'll be next one. But I think he's someone who builds meticulously, someone who builds piece by piece and wants to get his guys in and his culture established. And I think he's closer to that now than he's ever been at UConn. I think he's made incremental progress in that way. I'm sure it bothers him that he's not playing for Big East title at this point. And I'm sure it bothers him some of the games that they've lost and how they've lost them. But I know that in Dan's mind, he sees opportunity going forward, whether it's in New York or beyond. And he can use this to put a chip on UConn's shoulders, whether it's players, fans, his own coaching staff. And he will play on that over the next couple weeks into March, and he will maximize it at some point through his messaging. And ultimately, if that's what it takes to drive his team on, and potentially win a couple games in March, he will do it.
Well, Bill, I appreciate the time. Thanks for sticking with me for a couple ones. Came a little impromptu there, so thanks so much for that. And enjoy the game on Wednesday. Gonna be a good one.
Thanks, Jared. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, anytime.